The revelation that South African President Cyril Ramaphosa quietly approved the establishment of a United States drone base on South African soil has sent tremors through Africa's political and security landscape. The disclosure, which until recently was buried beneath layers of diplomatic secrecy, has sparked outrage among many African leaders who view the decision as a dangerous invitation for foreign military entrenchment. But perhaps no response has been as forceful, direct, and uncompromising as that of Burkina Faso's young revolutionary leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. In a fiery speech that spread like wildfire across the continent, Traoré not only condemned the move but also framed it as a defining moment in the broader struggle between African sovereignty and Western control. At the heart of this controversy lies a simple but profoundly consequential question. Should African nations be leasing their lands, airspace, and resources to foreign powers, especially at a time when the continent is fighting to break free from the chains of dependency? The U.S. government has long maintained drone operations in Africa, often citing counterterrorism efforts as justification. Bases in Djibouti, Niger, and other strategic locations have played a central role in American operations across the Sahel, Horn of Africa, and beyond. Yet, the decision to situate such a base in South Africa marks an escalation of U.S. presence into one of the continent's most economically and politically significant states. For Washington, the move offers a vantage point for intelligence gathering, surveillance, and potential operations not only across southern Africa, but also deeper into the Indian Ocean for Ramaphosa's government. It appears to be framed as a pragmatic security partnership, a means of strengthening ties with a global superpower while ostensibly bolstering South Africa's own defense capacity. But for Traoré, and for millions across Africa, the deal reeks of betrayal. In his blistering speech delivered before an audience of African youth and broadcast to international media, Traoré argued that Africa's freedom remains hollow if its leaders continue to cede sovereignty in exchange for short-term financial or political gain. His words were sharp and unapologetic, carrying the urgency of a young leader who believes his generation has no time to waste on appeasement or compromise. He accused Ramaphosa of inviting new forms of colonial occupation, warning that the presence of American drones in South Africa could destabilize the region, make the country a target for foreign adversaries, and undermine Africa's efforts to establish independent security frameworks. What makes Traoré's intervention particularly striking is the way he framed it within a broader historical narrative. He evoked the memory of Africa's liberation struggles, drawing parallels between colonial governors of the past and contemporary leaders who align too closely with Western powers. He asked his audience to consider what generations of freedom fighters would think if they saw the continent's resources and strategic locations once again handed over to foreign militaries. For Traoré, this is not merely about South Africa or Burkina Faso. It is about the soul of Africa itself. His fiery delivery painted Ramaphosa's decision not as an isolated incident, but as part of a dangerous pattern, one in which Africa's leaders, under pressure or seduction, make choices that erode the hard-won autonomy of their nations. The controversy also reveals the sharp divide among African leaders on questions of foreign partnerships. Some, like Ramaphosa, see engagement with the U.S. as a pragmatic path toward modernization, access to advanced technology, and international security cooperation. Others, like Traoré, argue that true development and stability can only emerge when Africa takes complete ownership of its own defense and economic systems. This divide is not merely theoretical. It has real implications for the balance of power across the continent. By allowing a U.S. drone base, South Africa places itself firmly in alignment with Washington's strategic interests. At a time when many African nations are leaning toward multipolar partnerships, deepening ties with China, Russia, and regional alliances like BRICS and the African Union's security apparatus, Traoré's speech also struck a chord because it articulated the concerns of ordinary Africans. Across social media, activists, journalists, and citizens echoed his sentiments. questioning why African leaders so often sign secretive agreements with foreign powers without consulting their people. The secrecy of Ramaphosa's deal was a particular sticking point. By approving the base quietly without broad public debate, critics argue that the government sidestepped democratic accountability. Traoré seized on this point, reminding his audience that sovereignty is not the possession of presidents alone but of the people. When leaders act in secret, he warned, they open the door to exploitation and manipulation. The fiery nature of Traoré's address was matched by his substantive policy proposals. He called for the acceleration of Pan-African security initiatives that would reduce reliance on Western powers. He urged African nations to invest in their own surveillance and intelligence capabilities, arguing that Africa has the resources and ingenuity to protect itself without foreign interference. Furthermore, he challenged South Africa specifically, suggesting that a country with its technological and industrial base could easily develop its own drone program rather than hosting foreign military infrastructure. His words reflected a deep belief in African self-sufficiency, a vision where collaboration happens on Africa's terms, not through dependency. Globally, Traoré's speech drew mixed reactions. In Western capitals, officials dismissed his rhetoric as inflammatory, arguing that U.S. drone operations are essential in combating terrorism. But within Africa and across parts of the global South, his words were seen as a rallying cry. Leaders who have long been frustrated by Western double standards found validation in his defiance. In the streets of Ouagadougou, Johannesburg, Lagos, and Nairobi, young Africans circulated clips of the speech, praising Traoré for saying what many feel but few leaders dare to articulate. This moment also underscores the generational contrast in African politics. Ramaphosa, representing an older generation of leaders shaped by the pragmatism of post-apartheid politics, is more inclined toward compromise and gradual reform. Traoré, by contrast, represents a youthful energy that is impatient with half measures and deeply skeptical of Western motives. His defiance resonates with a generation of Africans who are disillusioned with traditional political elites and eager for leaders who speak with moral clarity, but beyond rhetoric. The stakes are enormous. The presence of a U.S. drone base in South Africa could reshape regional security dynamics. On one hand, it may provide the U.S. with enhanced capacity to monitor threats and conduct operations across the continent. On the other, it risks making South Africa, and by extension, the African continent more deeply entangled in great power rivalries. China and Russia, both of whom have been courting African nations with economic and security partnerships, are unlikely to view such a development neutrally. Already, analysts warn that Africa could become a theater for proxy competition, with foreign powers using the continent as a staging ground for their broader global conflicts. Traoré's speech, then, was more than just a passionate outburst. It was a calculated intervention in a high-stakes geopolitical game. He positioned himself as a guardian of Africa's sovereignty, willing to confront not only Western powers but also African leaders who enable foreign dominance. His defiance challenges the narrative that African nations must choose between security and independence, arguing instead that true security can only come from independence. The public's reaction to both the revelation of the drone base and Traoré's response also reflects the shifting political consciousness of Africa. Increasingly, citizens are demanding transparency, accountability, and genuine sovereignty. They are less willing to accept backroom deals and more eager to see leaders who embody the spirit of resistance and empowerment. Traoré's ability to channel this sentiment suggests that he is not merely a national leader but a continental symbol of change. The question now is how this controversy will unfold. Will Ramaphosa's government backtrack under domestic and continental pressure? Or will it double down on its partnership with the United States? Will other African leaders rally behind Traoré's call for sovereignty, or will they remain silent to preserve their own ties with Washington? And perhaps most importantly, will this moment mark the beginning of a new wave of Pan-African resistance to foreign military entrenchment? Or will it fade into the background as yet another episode in Africa's long struggle with external influence? What is certain is that Traoré has once again proven his ability to capture the imagination of Africans across borders. His fiery speech was not merely a denunciation of one deal, but a profound statement about Africa's future. He reminded his audience that independence is not a gift handed down by foreign powers, but a responsibility that must be defended by each generation. In doing so, he positioned himself at the forefront of a growing movement demanding a new era of African sovereignty, dignity, and unity. The controversy over the U.S. drone base in South Africa is far from over, but one thing is clear: Ibrahim Traoré has made it impossible to ignore. By calling out Ramaphosa and the U.S. in such uncompromising terms, he has reignited a debate about who truly controls Africa's destiny. For his supporters, this marks another chapter in the rise of a leader who refuses to bow to external pressure. For his critics, it is a dangerous escalation that could alienate potential allies. But for Africa's youth, it is a moment of clarity, a reminder that the fight for sovereignty is far from finished, and that the future of the continent will be decided not in secret deals or foreign capitals, but in the courage and vision of its own leaders.